I woke to the sound of the front door slamming shut. A second later, my house was filled with voices and stomping, as if the invading army had decided to set up headquarters here. I knew what that meant. Wendy had brought the kids again without warning. The clock on the bedside table showed 6:15 in the morning. I struggled to sit up, writhing against the pain in my joints. Arthritis was becoming unbearable in the mornings, especially in this damp spring weather. My fingers wouldn't listen, and it took me a full minute to button my robe. Years of shorthand had taken its toll on my hands. Mom! Wendy was standing in the bedroom doorway, fully dressed, with an expensive bag over her shoulder. I have to go to work right away. Dr. Finnegan has a double appointment today, and his assistant is sick. The kids have already had breakfast, but Ashley needs to be taken to practice by 10 o'clock. Oh, and Reed wants pancakes. He's hungry. Before I could even say hello, she had already turned on her heels. I'll pick them up tonight, maybe late. I have a meeting after work. Wendy, I finally found my voice. You could have called ahead. I have a doctor's appointment at 11 today. She turned around in the doorway, and I saw that familiar grimace of annoyance that was turning her pretty face into a mask of distaste. Reschedule. It's just a routine checkup, right? It's not like you're going to die if you miss it once. The door slammed again, and I heard her car pull away from the house. The doctor's visit I'd waited 2 months to discuss a new arthritis treatment would now have to be postponed. I sighed and slowly got out of bed. In the living room, 16-year-old Ashley was lying on the couch, tucked away on her phone. She was too thin as a cane. Her black jeans hung on her hips like a hanger. I tried to talk to Wendy about the fact that the girl was barely eating, but my daughter only brushed it off. All modern girls are like that. Good morning, Ashley, I said as I walked by. She mumbled something, not taking her eyes off the screen. I didn't insist. I'd once thought I'd be surrounded by loving grandchildren when I was old, but the reality was more prosaic. To Ashley and Reed, I was a sort of domestic servant, someone who cooked meals, washed clothes, and drove me to sections, but didn't deserve even a glance. In the kitchen, I found Reed rummaging through my refrigerator. At 14, he was already half a head taller than me. Grandma, don't you have anything good to eat? He asked, slamming the refrigerator door shut. Good morning, Reed, I replied. Your mom said you wanted pancakes. I'll make some right now. Forget it, I'd rather eat cereal. He grabbed a box from the kitchen table and poured it generously into a bowl, spilling half of it on the countertop. Do you have milk? I silently pulled milk out of the fridge and set it in front of him. Reed poured the cereal and, without cleaning up after himself, walked off into the living room. I heard him turn the TV on full volume. 32 years I'd been recording other people's lives in the courtroom. 32 years I sat quiet as a mouse, recording every word of the witnesses, the lawyers, the judges. I saw murderers and thieves, saw victims of violence and fraud. I recorded stories of broken families, listened to the testimony of children against parents, and vice versa. I thought nothing human could surprise me. But somehow, I wasn't prepared for my own family to be the source of such pain. How many times had I heard the phrase ungrateful children in court? How many times had I recorded the tearful testimony of old people who had been cheated or abandoned by their own offspring? Now I was one of them, a character in someone else's story. I started making breakfast for myself, pondering how it had all come to this. Corey, my son, moved to Portland 5 years ago. At first he called every week, then once a month, now on major holidays. His new wife, Tracy, doesn't seem very interested in having a relationship with me. They have a daughter I've only seen twice. My granddaughter doesn't know me. Wendy has always been a difficult child. After Clay died 8 years ago, she became even more demanding. My husband wasn't a model father or spouse, drank too much, talked too little. But he provided for the family, and in his sober periods we found some semblance of harmony. His death from cirrhosis was expected, but it still shook us. Wendy blamed me for not keeping him safe, as if anyone could have kept Clay Tennyson from the bottle. I was eating my toast when the phone rang. It was Wendy. Mom, I forgot to tell you, I need money for Ashley's dental work. I almost choked. Wendy, I don't have any money right now. Don't be ridiculous. She cut me off. You just got your pension. And you should have savings. It's your granddaughter after all. I understand, but. Mom? Her voice became dangerously quiet. Don't start. You live alone in a 3-bedroom house. All your expenses are cat food and utility bills. Where do you spend your money? I didn't bother telling her that half of my pension goes to medications that insurance doesn't cover, or that I'm still paying off the loan on the house Clay and I took out the year before he died, when we decided to move closer to our daughter. I'll see what I can do, I said finally. Great. I'll pick up the check tonight. Wendy hung up without saying goodbye. I looked at my hands covered with veins and age spots. Those hands had held the steno machine for so long that I still sometimes wake up at night with the phantom sensation of keys under my fingers. Those hands washed children's clothes, made lunches, wiped tears. Now they seem as useless as I am. The day dragged on endlessly. I drove Ashley to practice, then drove to the supermarket because Reed announced that there was absolutely nothing to eat in the house. I spent almost $200 on groceries, knowing that most of it would go untouched when the kids left. Ashley doesn't eat meat or dairy. Reed won't touch vegetables. Wendy insists that I have to have proper food in the house for her kids, but never offers to split the cost. When we got home, I discovered that Reed hadn't turned off the TV and had left snack wrappers scattered all over the living room. I silently began to clean up. Grandma, Reed called out to me from his room. Have you seen my headphones? No, honey. Are you sure? I left them on the kitchen table. I looked around the kitchen again. The headphones weren't there. They're not here, Reed. He appeared in the doorway, annoyed. You must have moved them somewhere. You're always moving things around. I didn't touch your headphones, I replied calmly. Shit, Grandma. He rolled his eyes. They cost $300. If you lost them, you'll have to buy new ones. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to keep quiet. In court, I'd learned to keep a straight face even when I heard the most horrible things. That habit had come in handy in my family life with Clay, and now with my children and grandchildren. In the evening, Wendy texted to say she was running late and would be home for dinner. I made lasagna, the one dish that everyone in the family liked. While I was cooking, Loretta, my neighbor and only friend, called. What's up, Marge? She asked, her voice hoarse from cigarettes. I'm fine, I answered automatically. The grandkids are visiting. Unannounced again? I could hear the disapproval in Loretta's voice. Unlike me, she was never shy about voicing her opinion. Wendy had to go to work. Yeah, and there's no one in Boise but you to babysit teenagers who can take care of themselves. I sighed. Loretta, don't start. Okay. Listen, I got tickets to that new Meryl Streep movie. Will you go with me on Saturday? I hesitated. The last time I went to the movies was over a year ago. I don't know, Loretta. Wendy might bring the kids again. Oh my God, Marge, Loretta exclaimed. You're not a slave. Tell her you have plans. She'll find a place for her offspring. We'll see, I said evasively. When Wendy finally arrived, it was almost 9 o'clock in the evening. The kids were hungry and cranky, and I was tired too. We sat down at the table and Wendy began to talk about her day. The cranky patients, the stupid co-workers, how everyone didn't appreciate her. I ate in silence, nodding in all the right places. Ashley picked at her food without bringing it to her mouth. Reed swallowed his portion in 5 minutes and reached for more. Okay, Mom, Wendy said when the job story was over. About the money. I sighed. Wendy, I checked my accounts. I don't have $1,000. I can give you $500 now and maybe a little more next month. My daughter's face darkened. Just a little more? Are you kidding me? Mom, these are your granddaughter's teeth. What could be more important? Grandma's just greedy, Reed muttered with his mouth full. She's got tons of money. I saw her retirement account statement on the table. I froze, so he was going through my papers. Reed, this is private. Mom, Wendy interrupted me. Is it true you have money and you refuse to help your granddaughter? It's my rainy day fund, I said firmly. In case she gets sick or… Oh my God, Wendy shook her hands. You're so selfish. You have health insurance. Your house is almost paid off. What more do you need? Save for a funeral? You know what? Don't worry. I'll personally make sure you get cremated at the cheapest rate possible. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. Even Ashley looked up from her plate and squirmed uncomfortably in her chair. Mom, don't, she mumbled. Yes, you do. Wendy pounded her palm on the table. I'm tired of this. We do everything for her. Visiting, helping with the house, keeping her company. And she won't even spend some of her precious money on her family. I remained silent, looking down at my plate. How many times had I sat in a courtroom listening to people yell and accuse each other and thought they should just calm down and talk like reasonable beings? Now I was realizing that it's not that simple. When you're under attack, all intelligent thoughts go out of your head. You know what? Wendy lowered her voice, which was even scarier than screaming. You're going to regret this. When you end up in a nursing home, in the cheapest room with 3 roommates. Remember this conversation. She got up from the table. Kids, pack up. We're leaving. But I haven't finished, Reed protested. You can take it with you, Wendy said. By the way, Mom, since you're so frugal, I think we should reconsider your finances in general. Starting tomorrow, I'll be taking your pension for safekeeping. It'll be better for everyone. I looked up. What? You heard me. Obviously, you can't handle money properly. It happens at your age. You start forgetting things, making strange decisions. It's better if I control your spending. Wendy, you can't. I can, Mom. I'm your daughter and your next of kin. I'll get a medical opinion if I have to. Dr. Finnegan won't say no to me. Wendy turned to the children who were already standing at the door, confused and embarrassed. Say goodbye to Grandma. I don't know when we'll see her now. Bye, Grandma, Reed mumbled without looking at me. Bye, Grandma, Ashley echoed, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. The door slammed shut, and I was alone in the silence of my house. There were plates on the table, and the lasagna was getting cold. I slowly lowered myself into a chair and stared into space. A burden. The word rang in my head like the striking of a bell. I'd heard many insults in my 32 years in court, but somehow that simple 5-letter word, spoken by my own daughter, hurt more than all of them combined. I looked down at my hands on the table. They were trembling, but not from fear or weakness. It was from anger. Anger that I'd been holding back for years. The anger that built up inside me every time Wendy was late picking up the kids, every time Corey forgot to call on my birthday, every time the grandkids looked right through me like I was a ghost. Invisible. That's what I became to my family. Someone who is only noticed when money or favors are needed. Someone to blame for all their problems. Someone to get rid of when they become a liability. I remembered the Horton case that was heard in our court 5 years ago. An elderly woman changed her will at the last minute, disinheriting her children in favor of a cat shelter. Her son argued that his mother was incapacitated, but a judge ruled otherwise. Frustration with one's own children is not a sign of dementia, he said at the time. I wiped the last plate and set it on the shelf. A plan was slowly forming in my head, not just escape or surrender, real revenge. I'd never thought of myself as a vengeful person, but maybe it was time to change that. The morning after the fight with Wendy was chilly. Rain pounded the eaves and the wind swayed the old apple tree outside the window, scratching the glass. I sat in the kitchen, clutching the cup of tea that had gone cold. Sleep was impossible. All night I'd been replaying my daughter's words in my head. A burden. Nursing home. I'm not going to bother with you. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my daze. Loretta stood on the doorstep, wrapped in a waterproof coat, a bag in her hands. Hi, friend, she said, shaking off the raindrops. I brought blueberry muffins from that new bakery on Fulton Street. I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. Loretta cast an attentive glance at me and frowned. Marge, you look like a ghost. Is something wrong? I helped her take off her coat and hung it on the hook by the door. Wendy came by yesterday, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, and from the look of you, it wasn't a friendly visit. Loretta went into the kitchen and started taking muffins out of the bag. Tell me about it. I put the kettle on and sat down across from my friend. Loretta was the only person I could be myself with. We'd met 15 years ago when she was working as a bailiff. Tall, straight as a stick, with short gray hair and a tongue as sharp as a razor, she terrified debtors. But Loretta was always gentler with me. Maybe it was because she'd seen me silently put up with Clay's antics when he'd come to court drunk and make a scene. She wants to take my pension, I said finally. She says I can't handle the money, that I forget things, that I'm a burden. Loretta snorted. What a bitch. I'm sorry, Marge, but your daughter is a bitch. She always has been. I sighed. She wasn't always like that. When Clay started drinking harder, she, changed. Don't defend her. Loretta put her hand on mine. Just because her father was an alcoholic doesn't give her the right to treat you like that. You're not to blame for his problems. I looked away. Was it really true? For so many years, I'd believed that if I'd been a better wife, Clay wouldn't have sought solace in the bottle. That if I was a better mother, my kids wouldn't be estranged from me. You know, I remember how he and I met, I said quietly, looking out the window at the rain. I was 22, just starting out in the courtroom. He came in as a witness in a traffic accident case. Tall, handsome, in a traffic inspector's uniform. All the girls in the clerk's office had their eyes on him. He chose me. He invited me for coffee after the hearing. Loretta listened silently, stirring her tea. She knew I needed to talk. The first few years were good. He was attentive, caring. When Corey was born, Clay was over the moon. Back then, he only drank on weekends with friends. It was a regular thing. Then Wendy came along and something changed. He got irritable. He'd stay late after work a lot. I could smell the whiskey when he came home, but I kept quiet. I thought it was only temporary. I sipped the tea that had gone cold. By the time Wendy went to school, Clay was drinking every day. Sometimes he'd just fall asleep in front of the TV. Sometimes he'd get violent. Never hit me or the kids, but, words can hurt just as much. You had to leave, Loretta said quietly. I shook my head. Where? I didn't have money for a place of my own. My paycheck was just enough to pay the bills and eat. Clay was my main income after all. And who would hire me with 2 small children? I couldn't risk it. Loretta nodded. She understood. In those years, it was almost impossible for a woman with children and no college education to start a new life. Wendy was 12 when the worst happened, I continued. Clay had been in a car accident, drunk driving. He got fired from the DMV. We lost our insurance, almost everything we had. He got a job in construction, but the pay was half as much. I closed my eyes, remembering that hard time. I took extra shifts at the courthouse. I'd come home at 9 p.m., cook dinner, check on the kids' homework. Corey was a teenager then, withdrawn, and Wendy. She was so angry, at her dad, at me, at the world, yelling that we ruined her life, that all her friends went on vacation to Florida and she had to wear secondhand clothes. Spoiled brat, Loretta grumbled. No, I shook my head. She was just a kid who had to face adult problems too soon. I paused, gathering my thoughts. In high school, she got involved with a bad crowd, started skipping classes. I'd find cigarettes in her backpack. One time I caught her with a bottle of whiskey she'd stolen from her father. We had a terrible fight. She screamed that she hated me, that I ruined her life by my inaction, that I made her father drunk. Bullshit, Loretta snorted. You didn't make Clay drink. Maybe I didn't, but I couldn't stop him. I should have. Marge, listen to me. Loretta took me by the shoulders and forced me to look her in the eye. You did everything you could. You kept your family afloat when Clay went rogue. You gave your kids a home, food, and education. What else were you supposed to do? I didn't answer. What could I say? That I'd lived for decades in fear of being alone with my kids? That I was used to keeping silent even when my insides were screaming with pain and humiliation? That now that my children were grown, I didn't know who I was without my role as a sacrificial mother? Anyway, I said, coming back to the present, Wendy wants to control my finances, says I'm getting dementia, that I'm forgetting things. And this coming from a woman who can't remember her own children's birthdays without a Facebook reminder. Loretta rolled her eyes. Marge, you're the most organized person I know. You still remember my phone number by heart, even though everyone's on smartphones. Habit, I shrugged. You couldn't use your phone in court. I had to memorize it. Exactly. Your memory is better than mine, and I'm only 71. Don't let her manipulate you. I sighed. What can I do? She's my daughter, and she's right. I'm getting old. What if I really need help? Then you'll go to your friends, Loretta said firmly. Me, social services, anybody but that ungrateful. She paused. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk about your daughter like that. It's okay, I smiled weakly. Sometimes I think the same thing. We finished our tea in comfortable silence. Loretta suggested we go to the movies next week, and I agreed. Whatever Wendy was up to, I wasn't going to stay cooped up and wait for my fate. After Loretta left, I decided to do some cleaning. Housework always helped me clear my head. I started in the living room, dusting off the bookshelves. On one of them stood a picture, Wendy in her graduation dress. I remembered that day as clearly as if it were yesterday. How proud I was that my daughter had graduated high school with honors and gone on to college. How I hoped everything would be okay now. Wendy dropped out of college in her third year. It wasn't for me, she said then. I was desperate. So much money and effort wasted. But I didn't argue. Corey had already left for Portland to look for a job. Wendy moved in with a friend and got a job as a receptionist at a clinic. A year later, she met Bryce, and 6 months later, they were married. I thought she'd be happy now, that our family would finally find peace. When Ashley was born, Wendy called me from the hospital crying. "Mommy, I can't handle this," she said. "I don't understand anything about babies." I took a vacation and came to help. For 2 weeks, I cooked, cleaned, got up at night to watch the baby so Wendy could sleep. When Reed showed up, it was the same story. Only this time, Clay was in the hospital with cirrhosis of the liver, and I was torn between my husband and my daughter. Clay died when Reed was 6. At the funeral, Wendy cried inconsolably, as if she had lost the person closest to her. "Daddy always understood me," she sobbed. "He was the only one who really loved me." I silently stroked her back, swallowing my resentment. Clay hadn't called his daughter in months. He didn't remember the names of his grandchildren. But in her memory, he remained a loving father, and I was the cold, calculating mother who hadn't tried hard enough to save him. I took the picture off the shelf and wiped the frame clean. Maybe it was all about my restraint. I learned in court to hide my emotions, to be an invisible person who only records other people's words, but has no right to my own voice. Maybe my children never felt my love because I didn't know how to show it? The ringing of the phone interrupted my musings. It was Corey. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded strained. "How are you?" "Hello, son. I'm fine." I sat down on the couch, ready to talk. "How are Tracy and the baby?" "Fine," he answered quickly. "Listen," Wendy called me. She said you were having memory problems." I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "That's not true, Corey. She said you forget names. You're losing things. Mom, this is serious. If you have dementia." "I don't have dementia," I said. "Your sister just wants to control my money." There was a pause. "Mom, I know it's hard for you to admit the problem, but Wendy is worried about you. We all do." "Are we?" I couldn't take it anymore. "And how does that worry manifest itself? You haven't been here since Christmas. You don't even call unless I call you." "I have a job, a family." "Everybody has a job and a family, Corey, but most people still make time for their parents." Pause again. I could hear him breathing hard. "Listen, Mom," he finally said. "Wendy lives right next door to you. She sees what's going on. If she says you need help, then you do. Wendy needs my money." I tried to speak calmly, but my voice was shaking. "She wants to sell my house." "What?" Corey seemed genuinely surprised. "No, she just wants you to be safe. Maybe a nursing home wouldn't be such a bad idea. There'd be medical staff, other people your age." "I don't want to go to a nursing home," I said firmly. "I want to stay in my house." "Mom, be reasonable. You can't live alone forever. What if you fall? Or forget to turn off the stove?" I took a deep breath. "Corey, I'm perfectly fine. If you want to be sure, come and check for yourself." "Yeah, I don't have that option right now. But maybe at Thanksgiving." Sure, I knew he wasn't coming. Like he hadn't for the last 3 Thanksgivings. We exchanged a few more sentences and said goodbye. I hung up the phone and stared into space. So Wendy had already processed her brother. What's next? File a petition with the court to declare me incompetent? The sound of a car pulling up made me tense up. Wendy's familiar blue sedan. But she wasn't alone. Bryce was sitting next to her. I backed away from the window, not wanting them to notice me. Why did the two of them come alone? Bryce usually tried to stay out of family matters. I heard the car doors slam, but no one came to the door. They remained seated in the car. I cautiously peeked out from behind the curtain. Wendy and Bryce were talking animatedly about something. Wendy was waving her arms, Bryce was nodding. On a sudden impulse, I crept to the front door and opened it slightly. A gust of wind carried bits of conversation to me. "We'll sell it for $350,000 minimum," Bryce said. "Real estate is going up in this neighborhood." "We have to move fast," Wendy said. Before she changed her mind, "We'll tell her the nursing home is a temporary measure until we find a nurse. And then? And then it'll be too late. The papers will be signed. Her home is our home. It's only fair, after all. We've taken care of her for so many years." I closed the door, trying not to slam it shut. My heart was pounding like crazy. They wanted to sell my house. My house that I'd been paying off for 20 years. The one I'd spent my whole life in. To sell it and pocket the money while I lived out my days in a cheap nursing home. The car pulled away and I exhaled a sigh of relief. They didn't go in. Maybe they decided to give me time to come to my senses and agree to their plan. I turned on the computer. It was time to take charge of the situation. The first thing I did was check my accounts. Pension, some savings, Clay's insurance. Not as much as I'd like, but enough to live on for a few years if I was frugal. Then I started looking for information about senior citizens' rights, about how to protect themselves from financial abuse by relatives, about nursing homes and the conditions in them. What I learned was not encouraging. Stories of children who manipulated elderly parents into signing documents, about nursing homes where the elderly lay in their own filth because there wasn't enough staff, about courts that sided with caring children, even when all the facts screamed otherwise. But there were other stories too, about elderly people who fought for their rights and won, about lawyers who specialize in protecting the elderly from financial abuse, about ways to secure their assets. I took a few notes and continued my search. Slowly, a plan began to form in my head. Risky, perhaps even crazy, but it was the only way to test how far my kids were willing to go. If Wendy is so sure I have dementia, well, I'll give her what she wants. I'll forget things, confuse names, get lost in familiar places. I'll make her believe that I really need help and I'll see what she does. My years in court have taught me one important thing. Always have a backup plan and evidence. I started writing down everything that happened between me and the kids. Every conversation, every threat, every manipulation. Maybe those notes will never be needed, but if it went to trial, I would be ready. I opened a new document and started writing a plan of action. The first step is minor signs of forgetfulness. Nothing dramatic, just minor slip-ups that can be blamed on fatigue or stress. Then, more serious episodes. Maybe forgetting an important meeting or losing something valuable. I have to be careful. The symptoms have to be compelling enough to cause concern, but not so serious that I'm immediately whisked away to a clinic. The fine line between plausible forgetfulness and obvious faking. Then I wrote down my real fears and doubts. What if the plan worked too well and I really was declared incapacitated? What if Wendy gains total control over my life? What if I'm left alone, unsupported, when I really need help? But what scared me the most was the thought that I might be right. That my children really only saw me as a burden, a source of money, a problem to be solved. That all the love I'd given them over the years meant nothing before the prospect of having my house and savings. I closed the computer and walked to the window. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. I had the most important decision of my life to make. To step back and let my children control my destiny. Or fight, risking losing the last vestiges of family ties. I thought of Judge Harrison's words that I had written down years ago. Justice requires not only laws, but also the courage of those willing to fight for it. At the time, those words had seemed to me a beautiful but empty phrase. Now I understood their meaning. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Loretta's number. "Hi, it's me again," I said when she answered. "Remember you said your niece was a family law attorney? I need her help. One more thing. Could you come by my place tomorrow? There's a plan I need to discuss." It was time to plant the seeds of future victory, or at least a worthy resistance. My new life began Tuesday at Albertson's grocery store on State Street. I was standing at the dairy counter when I spotted Sheila Porter, the mother of Ashley's classmate. She waved at me and headed in my direction with a wide smile. Marge, haven't seen you in ages. How's it going? I'd known Sheila for 10 years. Our granddaughters had once gone to ballet together, and we often chatted while waiting for them after class. But today, I looked at her with a slight perplexity, as if trying to remember. Hi. I paused. I'm sorry, Sheila blinked, her smile faltering. Sheila Porter, Grandma Madison. Oh, Sheila! I feigned relief. Of course I'm sorry. I've been kind of distracted today. She gave me a concerned look. Is everything all right, Marge? You seem a little, lost. I just didn't get enough sleep, I forced myself to smile. How's Madison? We talked for a few more minutes, but the atmosphere had changed. Sheila was looking at me with that special wariness I'd often seen in courtrooms when a witness started to doubt his or her testimony. I knew. After our meeting, she would call the other moms and grandmas. You know, Marge Tennyson didn't recognize me at the store. Maybe she has, you know. 3 days ago, I met with Mallory Prescott, Loretta's niece and family law attorney. We sat in a small cafe 20 miles outside of Boise, far enough away that we didn't run into anyone we knew. What you're proposing is quite risky, Mrs. Tennyson, Mallory said, looking over my notes. Faking the symptoms of dementia could backfire on you. If your daughter gets a medical report, she won't, I interrupted. I'm not going to get any tests. The goal is to get her to show her true colors, not to give her a real reason for medical intervention. Mallory nodded but looked unconvinced. Still, there are more direct ways to protect your assets. We can set up an irrevocable trust or a lifetime trust, which my daughter would challenge, claiming I was incapacitated when it was set up. I shook my head. No, I want to find out once and for all if my family really cares about me or just my estate. Mallory sighed. Okay, but let's at least take some precautions. First of all, we need to get a report on your mental health now, before you start your experiment. Secondly, I recommend we open a new bank account at a different bank, out of reach of your children. And third, review all documents related to your home and other property. I agreed. That same day, we visited Dr. Ramirez, an acquaintance of Mallory's, who performed a full examination and confirmed that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. The report was safely tucked away in Mallory's office safe. Now, standing in the supermarket with a basket full of groceries I hadn't really planned to buy, part of my absent-minded old lady image, I felt strangely excited. For the first time in years, I was in control. I was no longer a victim of circumstances. I was creating them myself. By evening, Wendy had already called. Mom, Sheila Porter just called me. She said you didn't recognize her at the store. I didn't miss the triumphant note in her voice. She was almost jubilant at having her claims about my forgetfulness confirmed. That's nonsense, I replied with slight irritation. Of course I recognized her. It was just noisy, and I didn't hear what she said right away. Mom, she says you looked at her like she was a stranger. Sheila's exaggerating as usual. I tried to sound confident, but with a note of defensiveness. I was just having a rough day. What bad day? Wendy sounded sarcastic. What did you do that was so hard? Watching TV? Feeding the cat? I ignored the shot. I didn't sleep well. My joints hurt. Okay. Wendy clearly didn't believe me. Anyway, I'll stop by tomorrow. We need to talk about your finances. I'm busy tomorrow, I lied. I'm meeting some friends from book club. What book club? She didn't hide her skepticism. The one Loretta organized. I added a note of uncertainty to my voice. Or was it a bridge club? I don't remember exactly. There was a pause. I could almost see Wendy smiling, having gotten another proof of my failure. Okay, Mom, Friday then. And don't forget this time, okay? For the next 2 weeks, I methodically sowed seeds of doubt. I forgot to turn off the oven when Wendy walked in unannounced. I mixed up my grandchildren's names, calling Reed Corey and Ashley Wendy. Twice lost my house keys, forcing my daughter to search for a spare set. I carefully recorded each such episode in my journal, noting not only my actions but also Wendy's reactions. To my bitter satisfaction, Not once did I see any genuine concern or desire to help. Only irritation, impatience, and, most tellingly, a growing interest in my finances. Mom, I think it's time we talked about your will, Wendy said after another episode with the lost wallet. And maybe get a power of attorney to manage your accounts. Why? I acted genuinely puzzled. There's nothing wrong with me. You just spent 2 hours looking for a wallet that was in the refrigerator. Wendy rolled her eyes. That's not fine. I was distracted, that's all. Look, she crouched down next to me, taking my hand with feigned concern. I just want to protect you. What if you forget to pay your bills, or lose all your savings, or let a crook into your house? I pulled my hand out. I'm not going to give you control of my money. Why do you always assume the worst? Wendy raised his voice. I'm your daughter. I care about you. You do? I looked her straight in the eye. Then why were you talking to Bryce about selling my house? Her face changed. For a second, there was a look of fear in her eyes that quickly turned to anger. You were eavesdropping? She jumped up. You pretend to be oblivious, but you're smart enough to spy on me? I accidentally overheard your conversation while you were sitting in the car in front of my house, I replied calmly. And yes, I'm still smart enough to realize what's going on. Wendy clenched her fists. You're taking phrases out of context. We were discussing options for the future. If your condition worsens, you're going to need specialized care. And specialized care costs money. And my house is the easiest way to get that money? Oh my God, Mom. She grabbed the bag. I'm trying to help and you're being paranoid. You know what? Figure it out on your own. But don't come crying to me when you find out you can't find your way home or you've forgotten your own name. She bolted out the door, slamming it so hard that the glass rattled. I exhaled slowly. This conversation had revealed Wendy's true colors even faster than I'd expected. Now I needed to speed up the preparation of my backup plan. The next day, I went to the United Bank of Idaho, where I'd never been before. I opened a new account in my own name and transferred half of my savings, enough to live on for a year if I had to disappear quickly. I hid the new bank card and documents in Loretta's house for fear that Wendy might start searching my house. Then I started sorting through Clay's papers, which had been gathering dust in the garage for years. My husband had never been very organized, especially in the last years of his life. The boxes of papers had been sitting untouched since he'd died. I just didn't have the mental strength to sort through the chaos. Now, as I methodically went through folder after folder, I felt strangely detached. Bills, letters, old photographs, evidence of a life that now seemed alien and distant. I had just about given up hope of finding anything useful when I discovered an envelope with the Farmers Insurance Company logo on it. Inside was a life insurance policy in Clay Tennyson's name, taken out 2 years before his death. The sum insured was $50,000, and I was named as the beneficiary. The policy had been in force at the time of Clay's death, but I'd never received any payments. With trembling hands, I dialed the insurance company's number. After much switching and waiting, I managed to get through to an agent who confirmed the existence of the policy. Yes, Mrs. Tennyson, the policy was indeed in your husband's name, the agent said after checking the database. But it was paid out in February of 2018. To whom? I sounded hoarse. Wait a minute. I could hear him typing. The payment was made by check made out to Wendy Paulson as trustee. We have a copy of the power of attorney signed by you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Can I get a copy of that power of attorney? Sure, we can send it to the address in our database. No, I almost screamed. I mean, please send it to my email address. An hour later, I was looking at a scan of a power of attorney with my signature on it. Or rather, a forgery of my signature. In my 32 years as a stenographer, I had learned to recognize the nuances of handwriting. Someone had studied my style well, but had made a few mistakes, too much pressure, the wrong angle. I slumped back in my chair, feeling a cold rage growing inside. Wendy had stolen $50,000 from me. My own daughter had forged my signature and embezzled insurance that could have provided me with a trouble-free old age. My first impulse was to call her and make a scene, or go to the police. But I forced myself to calm down. Anger is a bad counselor, especially when it comes to a game as complicated as the one I was playing. I had to be rational. I called Mallory and told her what I'd found. It's a serious crime, she said after a pause. Forgery, fraud, maybe even identity theft. But it won't be easy to prove, especially since it's been 7 years. I don't want to sue, I replied. At least not yet, but I want to use it as leverage if I have to. That's smart, Mallory said with approval. We can prepare a statement and have it ready. But, Mrs. Tennyson, I have to ask, how far are you willing to go? I wondered. What was I prepared to do? Destroy my relationship with my daughter completely? Disgrace her in front of her husband and children? Maybe even send her to prison? I just want to protect myself, I finally answered. And to see if there was anyone in my family who saw me as a person, not a purse or a burden. The next day, Wendy called as if nothing had happened. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. Her voice was emphatically cheerful. I was too harsh. I'm sorry. It's okay, I replied, feigning relief. I was overreacting too. Listen, Bryce and I want to invite you over for dinner on Friday. The kids miss their grandmother. I knew that was a lie. Ashley and Reed only spent time with me out of compulsion. But I agreed, realizing this was the perfect opportunity to continue my experiment. Friday night, I prepared myself thoroughly. I wore an elegant but slightly mismatched dress with a cardigan, deliberately applied lipstick just past the lip contour, took blood pressure medication that I didn't actually take, but it was supposed to serve as a prop. Bryce came to pick me up at 6 o'clock that evening. He was unusually kind, helped me into the car, asked how I was feeling. I answered a little absent-mindedly, occasionally forgetting the thread of the conversation. At Wendy's house, everything smelled of feigned concern. The children were washed and combed. The table was set with a festive tablecloth. Wendy greeted me with hugs and kisses, as if we hadn't fought a couple days ago. Mommy, you look great, she exclaimed. That color suits you so well. I smiled, accepting the compliment, even though I could see in the hall mirror that the turquoise cardigan was a terrible match for the mauve dress. At dinner, we talked about nothing. The kids' school, Bryce's job, the news from the neighbors. I kept the conversation going, but every once in a while I'd forget an important detail or mix up names. Each time, Wendy and Bryce exchanged meaningful glances. After dessert, Wendy invited the children to go to their rooms and brought out a file folder. Mom, there's something important we wanted to talk about, she began as she spread the papers out on the table. Bryce and I have been thinking a lot about your future, about how we can make sure you have a safe and secure old age. Oh, honey, you don't have to worry, I patted her arm. There's nothing wrong with me. Of course you are, Mom. She smiled with the kind of condescension usually reserved for small children. But you're not getting any younger, and your episodes of forgetfulness are becoming more frequent. What episodes? I frowned, showing genuine incomprehension. You see? Wendy turned to her husband. She doesn't even remember. Last week you forgot to turn off the stove, lost your keys, didn't recognize Sheila Porter, and today you wore that, color combination. I lowered my eyes, feigning embarrassment. I've just been a little distracted lately. That's why we want to help, Bryce interjected. We found a great place, Sunny Gardens. It's something between a nursing home and a resort. It has medical staff, a pool, gardens for walking, and most importantly, you'll be safe. I looked up slowly. You want to send me to a nursing home? It's not a nursing home, Mom. Wendy looked offended. It's a retirement community for active retirees. People your age live there. You can make new friends. What about my house? I deliberately shook my voice. Bryce and Wendy exchanged glances again. You see, Mom, Wendy chose her words carefully. Sunny Gardens isn't the cheapest place to live, but they offer an exchange program. You give them your property and in return you get a lifetime of living and care. So I have to give up my house? I let the fear creep into my voice. The house your father and I have been paying off for 20 years? Not give it away, but exchange it for guaranteed care for the rest of your life, Wendy explained patiently. Think how convenient that is. No bills, no worries about repairs, no fear of falling down and not getting help. I looked around as if looking for support. I don't know. This is so sudden. I need to think about it. Of course, Mom. Wendy squeezed my hand. But don't think too long. There are seats available at Sunny Gardens right now, and that's rare. I nodded, looking at the papers in front of me. They were Sunny Gardens brochures, glossy pictures of smiling old men playing golf or sitting in armchairs by the fireplace, and the real estate transfer agreement already prepared to be signed. Suddenly, I realized what this dinner, with its feigned warmth, really meant. It was a trap. They were hoping to catch me in a moment of weakness and confusion, to get me to sign the documents under the guise of caring. I'd like to see the place first, I said, controlling my voice carefully. And maybe talk to a lawyer. Wendy's face tensed slightly. You don't need a lawyer, Mom. The contract is standard. But sure, we can go to Sunny Gardens for a tour. How about tomorrow? I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, I objected gently. What doctor? Wendy frowned. You didn't tell me anything. Did I? I faked a look of mild confusion. I thought I mentioned, it's a doctor. I forgot the name, that new arthritis specialist. Mom, you're confused. Your rheumatologist is on vacation all month. I remembered. Oh yeah, you're right. Then I'm free tomorrow. That's great. Wendy brightened up. We'll pick you up at 10 in the morning. When Bryce drove me home, I called Loretta right away. They're setting a trap, I said, barely able to contain my excitement. They're gonna drag me to Sunny Gardens and make me sign the deed to the house. Sunnyside Gardens? Loretta snorted. It's the cheapest almshouse in the county. My cousin used to work there as a nurse. She says it's understaffed, and the prices are triple what they used to charge. It's pure fraud. I still have to go there tomorrow. I sighed. I have to keep the legend alive. But you're not going to sign anything, are you? Of course not. I'll just say I want to check with my son or something. Buys me some time. After talking to Loretta, I sat down at my computer and wrote down all the details of tonight. Reactions, looks, phrases. I was especially careful to describe the documents I had prepared and the attempt to get my signature without consulting a lawyer. Then I opened the hidden folder where I kept all the evidence of Wendy's machinations, from the forged power of attorney for insurance to tonight's attempt to swindle me out of my house. The evidence piled up, and each day my resolve grew stronger. At night I didn't sleep well. I was plagued by doubts. What if I was wrong? What if somewhere deep down inside Wendy really cares for me, just doesn't know how to show it? What if I was ruining my last chance at reconciliation with my family? But this morning, as I looked at pictures of Sunny Gardens online and read reviews from former guests, my doubts vanished. The place was exactly what Loretta had described, a cheap almshouse with a pretension to luxury. And Wendy was planning to send me there, taking my house. I glanced at my watch. It was 2 hours until my daughter arrived. It was time to prepare for the next act of our family drama. And this time I was determined not to give in. Sunny Gardens turned out to be exactly what I expected. A dreary complex of 3 beige buildings surrounded by stunted trees that did not justify the loud name of the place. The brochures promised luxury and comfort, but even a quick glance at the peeling paint and cracked steps of the main entrance said otherwise. Wendy held my arm tightly, as if she was afraid I'd run away. Bryce walked ahead, overly chipper and loud. The receptionist, a woman with tightly bunched hair and a fake smile, gave us a tour. 15 minutes of wandering through hallways that smelled of disinfection and old age. And here we have a recreation room, she chirped, showing us a room with a worn carpet and a few chairs arranged around a TV. Our residents love to gather here in the evenings to watch movies and socialize. 3 older men sat in the room, staring into the void in front of them. None of them spoke. One man was snoring quietly with his head resting on his chest. How sweet, Wendy chirped, squeezing my hand even tighter. See, Mom, there's such an active social life here. I nodded silently, playing the part of the obedient, slightly confused old lady. But inside, I fixed everything. The dirty corners, the cracked tiles in the bathroom of the model room, the nurse who passed by without even looking at the elderly woman calling her from her wheelchair. After the tour, we were invited into the office of the director, a burly man with a perfect smile and cold eyes. He laid out the contracts in front of us and began talking about a seamless transition into a new life. Your mom will get all the care she needs, he addressed Wendy and Bryce exclusively, as if I wasn't in the room. and you won't have to worry about her safety and well-being. How much will it cost? I asked, breaking my role as passive listener. The principal hesitated for a moment, then smiled even wider. Mrs. Tennyson, as I explained to your daughter, we offer an exchange program. You give us your home and we guarantee you lifetime residency and care. No additional payments. And what is the appraised value of my home? I continued to insist. Mom, Wendy intervened, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you'll be safe. I think it does matter. I looked the principal straight in the eye. My house is worth a lot of money. How much does it cost to live here a month? There was an awkward silence in the office. Wendy blushed. Bryce was suddenly interested in his shoes. Mom, you're making this so complicated, Wendy finally said. It's not just about money. It's about quality of life. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I stood up. I think we should go. But the contract, the director started. I have to think about it, I cut him off, and consult with my lawyer. The ride back was tense and silent. Wendy sat in the front seat next to Bryce, occasionally casting angry glances at me through the rearview mirror. When we pulled up to my house, she got out with me, leaving my husband waiting in the car. I'm disappointed, Mom, she said when we stopped at the porch. You're not even trying to help us help you. Help me? I looked at her with genuine surprise. Or get rid of me. How can you say that? Her voice trembled. After everything I do for you. What exactly are you doing, Wendy? I'm tired of this game. Coming over once a week to see if I'm dead? Leaving the kids unannounced when you need a free babysitter? Taking my pension for safekeeping? She recoiled as if from a blow. You don't understand. I have my own problems. Kids, work, bills. What bills, Wendy? I'm taking a chance. Maybe the ones related to your gambling addiction? Her face turned white. What? What are you talking about? I saw the online casino notifications in your mail when you left your phone at my place. It was a lie, but my gut told me I was on the right track. And the bank statements. How much have you lost so far? 10 grand? 20? Wendy swayed, grabbing the porch railing. Where did you? It's none of your business. She went on the offensive. Were you spying on me, spying on me? And then you claim your memory is fine? My memory is fine, I replied calmly. And I see more than you think. I paused, watching her reaction. For example, I see that Ashley barely eats, that she's getting thinner and thinner, that you're pretending like everything's normal. Wendy shuddered. Ashley's just on a diet. All girls her age are watching their weight. She's not on a diet, Wendy. She's anorexic, and she needs help. Don't tell me how to raise my children, Wendy exploded. She was choking with rage. You know what? Forget about Sunny Gardens. Figure it out on your own. When your beautiful memory finally fails, don't call me. She turned and ran to the car, almost falling as she went. I stood on the porch, watching as their car sped off and disappeared around the corner. Contradictory feelings struggled inside me. On the one hand, I was right. Wendy really did want to get rid of me and my possessions. On the other, I had just confirmed my worst fears about the state of my family. My daughter apparently had a serious gambling addiction. My granddaughter was slowly starving herself, and no one was going to do anything about it. I walked into the house and sank heavily onto the couch. For the first time since my game began, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Maybe I should have talked to Wendy directly about her problems, try to help Ashley. Maybe instead of playing up the dementia, I should have been looking for ways to keep my family together. But then I remembered the cold eyes of the director of Sunny Gardens. I remembered how easily Wendy had been willing to sign the papers dooming me to a life in that horrible place. I remembered the forged signature on the insurance policy and the stolen 50 grand. No, I couldn't back out. Whatever was happening to my daughter and grandchildren, one thing was clear. They didn't see me as an ally or a helper. I was just a nuisance they needed to get rid of. And if I wanted to make a difference in their lives, I had to do things differently. I called Loretta and briefly recounted what had happened. Thank God you didn't sign those damn papers, she grumbled. That daughter of yours. I'm sorry, Marge, but she's a bitch. She's sick, Loretta, I said quietly. She's addicted, and Ashley needs help too. What are you going to do? Save them? After everything they've done to you? I've been thinking. I don't know, But I can't just walk away, knowing that my granddaughter could die of exhaustion and my daughter could have her life ruined by gambling. Marge, listen. Loretta's voice became serious. You can't save people who don't want to be saved. Trust my experience. I've been trying to get my ex out of the bottle for years. All I accomplished was a broken rib and a nervous breakdown. I sighed. You're probably right, but I need to do something. Do what you plan to do, Loretta advised. Protect yourself. And then, from a position of strength, you can try to help them if they still want it. After I talked to Loretta, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at my garden. The apple tree that Clay and I had planted when we bought the house was full of blossoms now. Bees buzzed around it, busy with their work. Life went on, despite the human drama. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Mallory's number. I'm ready to sell the house, I said without preamble. And I need trust fund counseling. The next day, I met with Mallory at her office. We discussed the process of selling the house and the possible legal complications Wendy could create. She might try to challenge the sale by claiming you're incompetent, Mallory warned. But we have Dr. Ramirez's report and we can arrange another examination right before the deal. Okay, I nodded. What about the trust fund? You can set up 2 separate funds for your grandchildren, Mallory explained, with certain conditions for access to the funds. Like what? That's entirely up to you. Some of my clients set age limits. For example, the principal only becomes available when they reach the age of 25 or 30. Others tie disbursements to certain accomplishments, graduating from college, getting married, having children. I wondered. Could we set a condition for getting therapy? Mallory raised her eyebrows in surprise. It's unusual, but technically possible. Do you have a specific type of therapy in mind? Eating disorder treatment. For Ashley, I paused. And gambling rehab for Wendy, if that's possible. Mallory nodded. We could structure the fund so that some of the money would only be available after certain treatment programs. That would require an independent administrator to oversee that the conditions are met. One more thing, I added. I want Corey to be unaware of the existence of the fund for his daughter until she reaches 18. He's not too involved in her life, and I don't want this money to cause more estrangement. I see, Mallory made a note. That can be arranged too. We spent another hour discussing details and signing preliminary documents. When everything was ready, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't acting as a victim of circumstance, but as someone in control of my own destiny. The house was on the market in a week. I chose a small real estate agency that didn't work with Wendy and Bryce to minimize the risk of information leaks. To my surprise, a buyer was found almost immediately, a married couple from California moving to Boise. They offered even more than the asking price, afraid of missing out on a house in a good neighborhood. I didn't tell Wendy about the sale. After our fight, she didn't call or visit, which was to my advantage. I found out through my friends that she was spreading rumors about my dementia and senile dementia. It didn't bother me. Soon everyone would see how demented I really was. While the selling process was underway, I began to discreetly get rid of things. I included most of the furniture in the price of the house. It was old and of no value to me. Personal belongings I sorted through carefully. Photos, letters, memorabilia, all of it I packed into several boxes, which I gradually transported to Loretta's house. The day before the sale of the house was finalized, I got a call from Corey. I hadn't heard his voice in 3 months. Hi, Mom, he said as if nothing had happened. How are you doing? I'm fine, I said in a neutral tone. How are you? I'm fine. Listen, I'm calling because Tracy and I are planning on coming down for Thanksgiving. I wanted to make sure you'd be home. I clutched the phone. Thanksgiving was 6 months away. I planned to be away from Boise by then. That's great, Corey, I said. But I'm not sure about my plans. Maybe I'll go on a cruise with Loretta. A cruise? He sounded surprised. You've never mentioned cruises before. There's not much I haven't mentioned. I couldn't resist a slight quip. We haven't talked that much lately. Mom, don't start. His voice became irritated. I'm busy. I have work, family. Of course, I interrupted. Everyone has a job and a family, but most people still find time to call their mother more than once a quarter. There was a pause. Look, he finally said. I'm not calling to fight. I'm worried about you. Wendy says you're having memory problems. Oh, that's it. Wendy's gotten to him. Your sister is exaggerating, I replied calmly. There's nothing wrong with me. She says you refuse to recognize the problem, that you're becoming, uh, a little paranoid. I snorted. Paranoid? Because I don't want her to control my finances and send me to a nursing home? Mom. His voice became soft, coaxing. No one wants to send you to a nursing home. Wendy's just worried about you living alone in a big house. What if you fall down? Or forget to turn off the stove? I don't fall and I don't forget to turn off the stove, I said. And my house isn't that big. Still, Corey insisted, maybe you should think about moving to a place with a more controlled environment. I closed my eyes. My son, who hadn't seen me in almost a year, who barely called, had suddenly decided he knew how I should live my life. All based on the words of his sister, who was just as detached from my real life. Corey, I said firmly, I appreciate your concern, but I'll decide where and how I want to live. Okay, fine, but promise me you'll think about it, okay? And about Thanksgiving. Let me know your plans ahead of time. I will, I said, knowing that by Thanksgiving our conversation wouldn't matter anymore. After the call, I sat staring off into space for a long time. Talking to Corey was harder than talking to Wendy. With my daughter, it was clear she wanted my money, my house, to get rid of the obligation to take care of me. But Corey? He seemed genuinely concerned. Or was that just well-rehearsed concern masking equally self-serving motives? But then I remembered the forged signature on the insurance policy. The stolen 50 grand. Sunny Gardens with its dim hallways and the smell of despair, talking about selling my house behind my back. No, I wasn't wrong. Perhaps somewhere deep inside, Wendy and Corey still loved me. But that love was buried under years of resentment, a habit of taking me for granted, and most importantly, a desire to get my possessions. I pulled out the folder with the paperwork for the sale of the house and checked all the details one more time. Tomorrow, I would sign the papers and my house would officially go to the new owners. The money will be transferred into an escrow account, and from there, partly into trust funds for my grandchildren and partly into my new bank account. The plan was simple and effective. Sell the house, secure the grandchildren's future through tightly held trust funds, take the remaining money, and start a new life. A life in which I would not be invisible, a liability, or an ATM machine. But there was another detail I hadn't told even Loretta about. Before I left, I planned to leave letters. For Wendy, for Corey, for each of the grandchildren. In those letters, I would tell the truth. About how I faked dementia to test their true intentions. About how disappointed I was to see that to them I was just a source of money and free favors. About how my heart ached when I realized my daughter had stolen my money, and my son didn't even bother to check my condition personally before agreeing to send me to a nursing home. I tell them about trust funds for children and the conditions for receiving the money. That Ashley will only get her share after she's been treated for anorexia. About Wendy getting a chance at help with her gambling addiction if she agrees to go to rehab. In the morning, I met with Mallory and the real estate agents, signed all the paperwork, had another checkup with Dr. Ramirez, who confirmed my full capacity, finalized the creation of trust funds for the grandchildren. By evening, everything was finalized. I officially sold my house and disposed of the proceeds, a portion to Ashley's education and medical expenses, a portion for Reed for college and a future business, should he decide to start one, a small amount for Corey's daughter, whom I hardly knew, and the rest of the money was for me, for a new life. I stood in the living room of my now former home, staring at the empty walls. In 3 days, I had to vacate the premises. The new owners planned to do some renovations before moving in, so I had a little time to finalize my affairs. I sat down at my desk and started writing letters. I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by packed boxes, when I heard the doorbell ring. Looking out the window, I saw Wendy's blue sedan. After 3 weeks of silence, she had finally decided to visit me. It was about time. In 2 days, I had to vacate the house for the new owners. I walked slowly to the door, mentally preparing myself for the conversation ahead. Taking a deep breath, I opened it. Wendy stood on the doorstep with a strained smile, holding a package with the logo of my favorite bakery. Hi, Mom, She held out the package to me. I brought your favorite cinnamon buns. I silently took the package and stepped back, allowing her to enter. Wendy walked into the living room and froze when she saw the boxes. You're redecorating? There was confusion in her voice. No, I answered calmly. I'm moving. She turned to me, blinking perplexed. You're moving? Moving where? It doesn't matter to you anymore. I put the package on the table and sat down in the chair, gesturing for Wendy to sit across from me. Mom, what are you talking about? She laughed nervously, but didn't budge. Of course it matters. You can't just move. She hesitated, obviously struggling for words. You're in no condition to make that kind of decision. I'm in perfect health, Wendy. I looked her straight in the eye. I don't have dementia, and I never have. She laughed again, but this time with a tinge of panic. Mom, you don't understand. The forgetfulness, the confusion, their symptoms. You don't realize your condition. I'm perfectly aware of everything. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Here's Dr. Ramirez's medical report from 3 days ago. Full mental clarity and no signs of cognitive impairment. Wendy walked over and snatched the folder out of my hands. After quickly going through the documents, she turned pale. This is some kind of mistake. I mean, you were forgetting things, getting names mixed up. I was faking it, I said calmly. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was faking the symptoms of dementia to see how you'd react. I looked her straight in the eye. And your reaction told me a lot. Wendy sank down on the couch, still clutching the medical report in her hands. Were you faking it? All this time? She shook her head. Why? What was the point? I wanted to know if you really cared about me or if you just wanted to get your hands on my property. How can you say that? Her face contorted with anger. I'm your daughter. Of course I care about you. Caring looks different, Wendy, I said calmly. When you thought I had dementia, you didn't look for the best doctors for me. You didn't offer to move in with you. You didn't talk about hiring a caregiver. You immediately started planning how to put me in a cheap nursing home and sell my house. That's not true, Wendy jumped up. Sunny Gardens is a wonderful place with medical care. Sunny Gardens is an almshouse with a leaky roof and one nurse for 20 people, I retorted. You didn't even bother to check the reviews before you sent your mother there. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly unable to find an argument. One more thing, I pulled out another document. I found Clay's insurance policy, the one where you got $50,000 7 years ago by forging my signature on a power of attorney. Wendy turned white as chalk. I didn't, she stammered. It was for your own good. You were depressed after your father's death. You would have spent that money anyway. On what, Wendy? I interrupted her. On treating the arthritis that's been plaguing me for years? To fix the leaky roof on the house? Or maybe to help you pay for Ashley's college? She lowered her eyes. You wouldn't understand. I had debts. Gambling debts, I finished for her. I know about your addiction, Wendy, and Ashley's anorexia issues that everyone ignores. How did you? She paused. I'm not. I don't have an addiction, and there's nothing wrong with Ashley. She's just watching her figure. I shook my head. You can lie to yourself, but not to me. I've seen how nervous you get when the bills come in, how you hide your phone when you get texts, how you twist and turn when you explain to Bryce where the money disappears to. Wendy collapsed back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. You don't understand anything. You never understood what it was like for me. First my father and his drinking, then my marriage to Bryce, who's always on the road. I understand more than you think. My voice softened. I lived with an alcoholic for 30 years. I know the loneliness and the frustration, but that doesn't justify what you were going to do to me. She raised her head, her eyes glistening with tears. What do you mean? I sold the house, Wendy. What? She jumped up. You can't. It's the family home. You can't just sell it. I can, and I did. The papers were signed 3 days ago. The new owners move in 2 days. But where are you going to go? She looked really confused. That's not your concern anymore. Of course it is. Wendy raised her voice again. I'm your daughter. You can't just disappear. Why not? I asked quietly. You've been treating me like a burden for months. Called me a problem to be solved. Planned to get rid of me at the first opportunity. Now I'm solving that problem on my own. Wendy started pacing around the room, nervously rubbing her hair. This is ridiculous! You can't just walk away. And the money? What did you do with the money from the sale of the house? This is it, I thought. This is what she really cares about. I put some of the money in trust funds for my grandchildren, I replied, with certain conditions for access. What kind of conditions? She paused, looking at me suspiciously. Ashley will have access to her portion after she's treated for anorexia and graduates from college, I paused. And your part will be accessed after you rehabilitate from your gambling addiction. You had no right, Wendy screamed. This is blackmail. No, it's caring, I argued calmly. Real care, not the kind you pretended to care about when you tried to take over my house. Wendy rushed to the phone. I'm calling my lawyer. You are clearly out of your mind. We're going to contest this deal. Don't bother. I shook my head. The deal is legitimate. My mental health has been independently evaluated, and I have proof of your attempts to fraudulently take my property, including a forged power of attorney for Clay's insurance policy. She slowly put the phone down. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't make your daughter look like a fraud. I won't, I agreed. If you accept my terms. What terms? I could hear the desperation in her voice. First, you take Ashley to an eating disorder specialist, and you'll get help for your gambling addiction. Wendy slumped in her chair, suddenly aged 10 years. What do you want from me? I want you to be happy, I replied sincerely, and for your children to be healthy and happy. But I will no longer allow myself to be used as a source of money or a scapegoat for your problems. She looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. And if I say no, then the funds will remain in place, but with stricter conditions. And I'll turn over all the documents about the forged power of attorney to the police. You won't do that, Wendy said uncertainly. You're my mother. That's why I'm giving you a choice. I walked over to her and put my hand on her shoulder for the first time in a long time. Wendy, I have loved you from the moment you were born. I'll love you until my last breath. But love doesn't mean letting others ruin your life. She looked up at me with eyes full of tears. Are you really going to leave? Yes, I nodded. I need to start a new life. A life where I won't feel like a burden or an ATM. What about us? I could hear the childish resentment in her voice. You'll manage, I smiled softly. You always have, but now you'll have to do it without my financial support or constant help with the kids. She nodded, looking down at the floor. What am I supposed to do? Start with the truth, I advised. Admit it to yourself, then admit it to Bryce. Get professional help, and do the same for Ashley. She'd hate me if I dragged her to a shrink. Maybe at first, but then she'll be grateful. Trust me, I sighed. I'll leave you the contacts of the trusted fund manager. When you're ready to start treatment, contact him. Wendy nodded silently, still avoiding my gaze. What about Corey? Does he know? No, I shook my head. I'll call him tomorrow. But he's living his life, which I haven't had a place in for a long time. He'll blame me, Wendy muttered. Maybe he will. But that's not your problem. I touched her cheek gently. Each of us is responsible for our own actions. I'm responsible for mine, you for yours, Corey for hers. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Wendy stood up. I gotta go. The kids, Bryce. She hesitated. I have to think about all of this. I nodded and walked her to the door. I'll leave the letters for you and the kids on the table, I said. You can have them when I leave. You're not even going to say goodbye. I could hear the hurt in her voice again. We're saying goodbye now. I looked into her eyes. I love you, Wendy. I always have. But I need to go away to find myself. And you need to learn to live without me, as a source of money, as a babysitter, as a scapegoat. Suddenly she hugged me tight, like when I was a child. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to. I didn't think. I know, I stroked her back. Just try to fix what can still be fixed. When she left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching her car disappear around the corner. A strange feeling of devastation and release swept over me at the same time. For the first time in years, I had told my daughter everything I thought. For the first time, I didn't try to soften the blow, to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. I went back to the table and pulled out the 4 envelopes I had prepared in advance. One for Wendy, one for Corey, one for Ashley, and one for Reed. In each one, I wrote the truth about my dementia simulation experiment, about the family's secrets revealed, about my decision to leave. I didn't accuse or make excuses. I simply stated the facts and my feelings. When I finished, I stacked the letters neatly on the table and went to the bedroom to finish packing my personal belongings. Tomorrow, Loretta was supposed to come with a truck to pick up the remaining boxes. I didn't sleep well during the night. I had strange dreams, Clay young and sober. Wendy as a child running through a meadow with a kite, a trial where I wasn't a stenographer but a judge sentencing myself. I awoke with the dawn, feeling strangely calm. Loretta arrived exactly at 10, driving a rented truck. "So, ready for the big escape?" She grinned, jumping out of the cab. "It's not an escape," I smiled back. "It's a strategic retreat." We quickly loaded the remaining boxes. There weren't many, mostly books, photo albums, and a few memorabilia. Everything else I either sold, gave away, or included in the value of the house. Before I left, I walked around the rooms one last time, saying goodbye to the house that was my refuge and my prison at the same time. Within these walls, I'd lived for 20 years. Clay had died here. My grandchildren grew up here, or rather, grew up coming here on weekends and vacations. Here I felt invisible for years, a person with no voice or desires of my own. But not anymore. I closed the front door, hung the key on the hook in the hallway for the new owners, and walked out the back door. Loretta was waiting for me in the truck, tapping impatiently on the steering wheel. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked when I sat down next to her. "It wasn't too late to change your mind." I looked at the house, the orchard, the old apple tree where my grandchildren and I picked apples for pies every fall. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Let's go." The truck started. I didn't look back. The road ahead was a road that led away from Boise, away from the past, away from a life where I was just a shadow of myself. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said when we got on the highway. "They didn't even realize I robbed them, not the other way around." "What do you mean?" Loretta threw me a quick glance. "They thought they were going to take my house and send me to live out my life in a cheap nursing home. Instead, I sold the house, secured my grandchildren's future, and got my freedom. By the time they realize what happened, we'll be long gone." I smiled as I looked at the scenery whizzing by. Ahead was Portland, where we planned to stop for the night, and then the Oregon coast, a small town where no one knew our names or stories. There, Loretta and I rented a small house overlooking the ocean, spacious enough for 2 single women starting a new chapter of life. I knew Wendy and Corey would be angry, that they would probably tell everyone they knew that their mother had lost her mind or gone senile, that they will accuse me of betrayal, of cruelty, of selfishness. But that's no longer my concern. My concern now is to live, to truly live, not to exist as someone's mother, grandmother burden, or ATM. I may still have years ahead of me, and I'm going to spend them on my own terms. I rolled down the window, exposing my face to the wind. It smelled of freedom and new possibilities. Loretta turned on the radio, and the cabin filled with the sounds of jazz. We drove toward the future without looking back, knowing that the consequences of our actions would take a long time for the family to reap. But maybe one day, those consequences would lead to healing. For them, for me, for all of us. In the meantime, the road led us farther and farther away from Boise, and each mile was like a new breath after years of suffocation.